Hey everyone, Nick here. Today I wanted to make a quick video about the differentials that I've used in my Bandit. And I wanted to make a video about differentials because they're really critically important to how a two-wheel drive buggy drives. And so making sure you have the correct diff in your Bandit is going to make a huge difference to the success you have at the track. And as you can see in front of me here, I have a lot of different options that I've tried, and I wanted to share that experience with you guys. So yeah, let's get into it. All right, so I just want to get straight into recommendations. So if that's what you're here for, you don't have to wait. So if you're running on dirt, the only thing I recommend is a ball diff. Ball diffs have some magical properties to them that just make them feel like they have a ton more grip and a ton more stability in loose conditions like dirt. You'll never get a gear diff to be as comfortable and as fast on dirt as a ball diff. So that's why this is what I recommend on dirt, and I only recommend a ball diff on dirt. For racing on carpet, you got a couple different options though. The bare minimum you can get away with, I think, is to take the stock gear diff and just cram it full of grease. I used Lucas Red and Tacky, and it's not the heaviest feeling diff in the world, but I think it's the bare minimum you can get away with. And on top of that, right, with this all plastic gear case that I have on it, it's the lightest diff by a significant amount. So this thing is 25 grams. These two are both 55 grams, so significantly lighter. If you're going to be running in like a 21.5 class, this might honestly be the recommendation I would give you. But for a regular 17.5 and for mod especially, you're going to want a sealed gear diff. And I would honestly just recommend the Hot Racing one. These things are only like $20, and I've seen them as cheap as $10 on AliExpress for like generic versions. These 272R diffs out of the Drag Slash, these are expensive, and I only have this because it was sent to me for free, and there's nothing about this that I found justifies the cost over the Hot Racing diff. These things are like $55, and these are like as cheap as $10, and really it's a no-brainer. Just go with the Hot Racing one. There's really nothing about this that makes it worth the price. So that's my recommendation. And for running oil, I used 100K in both diffs, and I thought that felt really good, and that's what I'm going to stick with. So those are my recommendations. All right, so this next part of the video is the one I'm the most excited about, and really the reason I wanted to make this video to begin with. So for the longest time, I've had this question eating away at me, and it's probably been eating away at you guys, or at least you guys have probably pondered it before, right? And that is, what is it about a ball diff that makes it so much better on dirt than a gear diff, right? This is a fact that has been known for a long time, that ball diffs are just superior on dirt compared to gear diffs, but I've never been able to find a really good answer. And in fact, right, there's a lot of conflicting information out there with answers that are the complete opposite of each other. And there's never been a way to know for sure, until now that I think, to know what those differences are. And that's what I'm excited about this part of the video for, is that I have found ways that demonstrate the actual differences between these differentials that go into explaining why it is that the ball diff is so good on dirt and why the gear diffs are so terrible. And so the first difference that you can actually observe quite easily, right, is what I call either the static resistance or static lock or static bind or static something. I'm throwing stuff around here. But the easiest way to demonstrate that is to simply take a diff, hold it in your fingers just by the main gear, not touching the out drives, and then take a hex driver and suspend that hex driver in one of the out drives. And what you'll notice is that with a ball diff, when you do this, the weight of the hex driver is not enough to get the out drives to start turning. But when you do this with a gear diff, the moment you let go of that hex driver, these out drives are going to start turning. See? So that is observable fact number one that is different between these types of diffs, right? This has static lock. This has like no static lock. The next difference you can observe is when you take these diffs and you apply a torque to the main gear to simulate how they would react under load when they're in the car and you're heavy on the gas or heavy on the brakes. So what you can do is you can take the diff, hold it with an out drive in each finger, right? And you can spin it by hand and get a feel for how much resistance there is in the diff. And then you can take the main gear of the diff and smash it real hard into something that's not going to move and apply a torque, and you can feel how much the diff locks up as you do that. And what you'll feel is that with a ball diff, it stays just as free-feeling as it does with no load as when you load it up. But a gear diff, when you do that, you will find that it loads up, or it locks up quite a lot when you load up this main gear. And so that is observable difference number 2 between these types of differentials, is that the ball diff stays very free under power and the gear diff locks up substantially under power, right? And so you might be asking yourself now, the way I did, right? You've got these observable differences between these types of differentials. Is that really what's driving the difference on the track that you feel? And the answer is kind of yeah, actually. So one thing I did to test that is I took a gear diff and I coated the gears with a black grease. And what that does, when you coat the gears with the black grease, it actually reduces the amount that the diff locks up under load. So that is sort of the first way that you can make a gear diff feel more like a ball diff. And then the next thing I did is I printed out these little TPU shims that I stuck inside the diff between the two outdrive halves. And what happens is when you screw the diff case back together, these outdrives pinch that shim, and then that creates that static lock like the ball diff has. And when I tested that diff in the car, it was probably the closest I ever got a gear diff to feeling like a ball diff. And so to me, that confirmed that those two observable differences between the gear diff and the ball diff are in fact what causes the difference you feel on the track. Now with that said, right, I couldn't get this to feel anywhere as good as the ball diff, and so on dirt I still 100% recommend a ball diff. But, you know, now you know why that's the case. What is the physical difference between a gear diff and a ball diff that makes them behave the way they behave on the track. And, right, you can also use this information to understand some of what people are doing when they play around with gear counts in their modern gear diffs, right? These have 4 gears in a cross pattern, and one thing you see people do is playing with the number of gears that they have installed in the diff. And what that does is that changes how much these diffs lock up under load. And again, that's something you can feel with that test I showed you, right? You can put 4 gears in here and put load on the main gear and see how much that locks up. And then you can take out 2 gears and run it as a 2-gear diff, and you'll feel that it locks up substantially more under load, right? And that's also why guys with 1/8 scale buggies are kind of doing those same experiments now. They're experimenting with, they're not doing 2 gears just because they have a lot more torque and weight to handle in their diffs, but they're running 3-gear diffs. And they're sort of finding the same thing, that right under load that makes the diff lock up more, and they're kind of liking the way that makes the buggy feel. So that's it for my Diff Science lecture. I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed learning it. And at the very least, I hope now you understand why it's absolutely critical that you need a ball diff and that you can't get away with a gear diff on dirt. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. All right, and that wraps it up for what I wanted to get across in this video. So what do you guys think? Do you think you want more content where I talk about setup stuff and setup science? Or do you just want me to stick to making videos about the car and to not gab so much about nerdy stuff? Let me know in the comments what you think. But if you made it this far, I want to say thanks for watching. Do all the usual YouTube stuff, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good day.